You think hitting bullseyes on a range makes you ready for war? Master Sergeant Derek Slater sneered out. Here, Collins, you're just a liability with lip gloss. Avery Collins didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She simply checked her rifle's bolt-locked eyes with the horizon and waited. Then it happened. The sniper's shot cracked across the Nevada mountains, sharp final. 3 enemy combatants dropped before anyone else had even found cover. And when the dust settled, every man on her team turned toward her. Not in mockery this time, but in stunned silence. They had mocked her, doubted her, tried to break her. But Avery Collins had been trained by someone they'd never even heard of, and now the woman they told didn't belong had just saved every single one of them. The wind at Fort Rivington carried a dry bite, sweeping across the rifle range and settling like dust in every crease of a soldier's uniform. It was the kind of place that burned away pretense. Everything here, every shot, every step had to be earned. For Corporal Avery Collins, walking into the elite sniper qualification program wasn't just another phase of her career. It was personal, and it was quiet. She didn't arrive with fanfare. No stories, no warnings. But behind her calm eyes and silent stride was a legacy almost no one knew about, one carried in old field journals and late-night whispers. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Samuel Collins, had been a ghost in the Vietnam jungle. With over 200 confirmed kills and an unofficial tally that climbed far higher, he was known in select circles as the sharpest eye in Special Forces history. He never spoke of it. He trained Avery in the cold Montana dawns with steady hands and hard lessons. Now she was here not to tell the story, but to finish it. The course accepted only the top 1% of shooters from across all branches. Out of the 24 selected, she was the only woman. From day one, that fact followed her like a shadow across the gravel. Her peers didn't need to say much. Didn't know the Army started issuing mascara with M24s? One mumbled as she unrolled her mat on the first morning. Careful, princess, another added. Wouldn't want you to chip a nail on that bolt. But Master Sergeant Derek Slater didn't joke. He didn't sneer. He dismantled. With 4 combat deployments under his belt and a reputation for creating or breaking future snipers, Slater made it clear Avery's presence was not a challenge to him. It was an insult. I've had to bury soldiers who were more prepared than you, he told her after her second drill. You want my advice? Get out before someone else has to pay for your experiment. Every morning he found a new way to tighten the screws. Microscopic critiques, tactical lectures turned into one-woman interrogations. He called her Collins the way some men say liability. Avery responded with silence, measured breathing, the subtle click of steel against steel as she cleaned her rifle alone at night, while others joked around fires. She knew this terrain, not the sand or the hills, but the resistance, the scrutiny, the cold stares of men who didn't want her there. But she also knew something they didn't. She didn't come to Fort Rivington to prove herself to them. She came because she had already proven herself to someone who mattered more. Because Samuel Collins didn't train her to be accepted. He trained her to be unshakable. So when Slater spat the words that would echo in her mind for days, "You think bullseyes make you a warrior?" She didn't respond. She exhaled, checked her scope, and aimed 800 meters downrange. Because warriors don't need permission. They just need the shot. By week 4, the desert heat wasn't the only thing blistering Avery Collins. The true pressure came in the form of cold eyes, loaded words, and the quiet rustle of respect being pulled away from her, piece by piece. It began with the subtle things. During inspection, Master Sergeant Derek Slater would call out a nearly invisible flaw in her rifle sling. Tension, something he'd ignore in 5 other candidates ahead of her. In field lectures, he'd pose complex windage problems and target compensation equations, then cut her off halfway through her response with a scoff. Not fast enough. In real combat, you're dead before you finish your first sentence. She tried not to let it in. She remembered what her grandfather always said. They'll come for your mind long before they come for your shot. But this wasn't just about tactics anymore. Slater wasn't simply testing her. He was isolating her. It worked. The other soldiers began peeling away like paint under the sun. At mess hall, conversations would taper off when she approached. No one said anything cruel to her face, but the cold was unmistakable. She was no longer one of them. She was something to be tolerated, if not outright avoided. The sting deepened during night drills. She was partnered with Corporal Jason Holt, a generally quiet soldier who until then hadn't seemed to take sides. They were crawling along dry creek beds, navigating toward a mock enemy position when his voice broke the silence. "Don't take this the wrong way," he said, keeping his eyes downrange, "but have you ever thought maybe this isn't the place for you?" Avery paused, her breath caught not from the question itself, but from the hollow certainty in his tone. Like he wasn't just asking, like he was already convinced. She didn't answer. She couldn't. That night in the dark stillness of the barracks, she found a slip of folded paper under her rucksack. Unmarked. No name. Just 4 words etched in thick square handwriting. "Request transfer before regret." Uttery on the back scrawled smaller, "Before you get someone killed." Avery sat on the edge of her bunk, her boots still dusty from the range. She unfolded her grandfather's letter, the one she always kept tucked inside her footlocker. The paper was worn soft from her hands, creased a dozen times from nights just like this. "Fire for those who can't. But remember, sometimes the one who needs defending the most is the warrior standing alone." She blinked hard, because now she understood this wasn't about her marksmanship. Not really. This was about breaking her from the inside out. Slater didn't need to fail her outright. He just needed to make her seem like a liability. Plant enough seeds, build enough doubt, turn just enough heads, and she was dangerously close to letting him succeed. She looked around the barracks, rows of men who didn't trust her, didn't know her, didn't want her there. And Slater. He'd made sure she stood apart from them. Not with a wall, but with silent suspicion and one very effective whisper campaign. But what they didn't know, and what Slater could never break, was the resolve buried deep in Avery's bones. The resolve that came from years of training with Samuel Collins in frozen Montana dawns. The resolve that didn't require applause or belonging or even approval. She didn't need to be liked. She needed to be undeniable. And if they weren't going to let her earn her place the traditional way, then she'd find another way to prove she'd already earned it. She folded the note, placed it in her footlocker beside her grandfather's letter. Then she pulled out her rifle and began cleaning it with mechanical precision, every movement deliberate, every part returning to readiness. The war for respect had gone quiet, but in Avery's eyes the next shot had already been fired. The Nevada mountains were harsh and unyielding, jagged ridgelines, bone-dry air and wind that could strip the moisture from your lungs. The perfect place for a final exam. And for Corporal Avery Collins, it would become something more. Week 6 was reserved for the ultimate evaluation, a full-scale live-fire exercise simulating real-world combat conditions. The terrain stretched across 30 square miles. Sniper teams were to infiltrate, locate a hidden objective, secure intel, and extract under pressure with no safety nets. The twist: each team would be operating with full autonomy, far from instructors with live ammunition. Mistakes would hurt, and if things went sideways, there'd be no do-overs. Slater grinned when the teams were announced. "Collins," he barked, "you're on Alpha Team." "With me?" "Of course." Avery didn't flinch. She simply nodded, slinging her pack over her shoulder. The mission began at dawn. 5 soldiers moved out Slater, leading Corporal Jason Holt behind him, and Avery designated to communications duty. It was a deliberate slight. "You're our ears, Collins. Let the shooters handle the real work," Slater had sneered. For 6 hours, they moved through the winding hills and ridgelines, locating the objective, a small comms relay hidden inside a rock outcropping. Avery stayed alert, monitoring the radio for updates. That's when everything changed. Her headset crackled, but the voice wasn't one of the instructors. "Control to all units. Code black. Repeat, code black. This is not a drill. Perimeter breach. Armed unknowns confirmed inside the training zone. Engage only if necessary. Evac point changed to grid Foxtrot 9. Before Avery could relay the message, the first shot rang out. It cracked across the ridgeline like thunder, smacking into the dirt just inches from Holt's boot. The team dove for cover, instincts kicking in, but they were exposed. No camouflage. No overhead cover. Just open hillside and scattered rocks. Slater scrambled behind a boulder, yelling into his radio. "Control, say again. Say again. Who the hell is in our zone?" Another shot echoed. Holt cried out, a graze to his upper arm, bleeding fast. And then silence. The kind that presses against your chest and dares you to breathe. Avery was already moving, not ducking, not hiding, moving. She hit the ground low, rifle up, scanning the ridge. While the others panicked, she was still, breathing, calculating, watching. A glint caught her eye. Sunlight reflecting off glass scope, maybe. Brush moved slightly, about 600 meters up the ridgeline. Firing position partially obscured. But she saw it, felt it. She exhaled, gently squeezed the trigger. Crack. The enemy sniper folded behind the brush like a broken marionette. The team froze. But Avery wasn't done. Two more shadows shifted behind a fallen log, flanking wide to trap them. She pivoted. Crack. Crack. Both fell before they took a second step. 3 shots. 3 hostiles down. In under 10 seconds. Silence again, but this time it was different. Behind her, Slater emerged from cover, stunned. His jaw slack, his rifle still raised uselessly. He stared at her. So did the others. Even Holt, bleeding, blinked like he'd just seen something impossible. "Avery," Slater said, almost breathless. Where did you learn to do that?" Avery stood slowly, reloading with practiced calm. Her hands didn't tremble. She glanced back at him. "My grandfather," she said quietly. "Samuel Collins. Vietnam Special Forces. Over 200 confirmed eliminations." She met Slater's eyes, and for the first time he looked away. "He started training me when I was 6, she continued. Taught me to track, breathe, move, wait. Taught me how to shoot without flinching, and how to see before others even know what they're looking for." Slater didn't speak. Couldn't. Because the woman he'd spent 6 weeks trying to humiliate had just saved every single man on his team. Avery shouldered her rifle and looked toward the horizon. "Evac's waiting at Foxtrot 9, she said evenly. "Let's move." No one argued. No one laughed. They followed. And for the first time since she arrived, she walked point. 3 weeks had passed since the ambush in the Nevada mountains. The bruises had faded. The headlines never came. But word traveled fast inside military circles. Corporal Avery Collins wasn't just another trainee anymore. She was the sniper who neutralized 3 armed hostiles in under 10 seconds. She was the soldier who saved her entire team. And she was the woman whose name suddenly carried weight in every corridor of Fort Rivington. But Avery didn't ask for attention. She kept training, kept silent, kept her grandfather's tattered letter folded neatly in her breast pocket. She hadn't joined for applause, she joined for legacy. And yet, the silence wouldn't last. The base's main auditorium buzzed with a low electric anticipation that morning. Every folding chair was filled. Officers in dress uniforms sat beside instructors and recruits. Even a few high-ranking civilians from the Pentagon had shown up unannounced. On stage stood Colonel Teresa Maddox, head of the Sniper Certification Division. Tough as nails, known for 3 things: her icy discipline, her impossible standards, and the fact that she never ever handed out medals lightly. Avery stood backstage, breath steady, but hands slightly clammy against the starched sides of her uniform. Then Maddox spoke. "We often say excellence needs no introduction," the colonel began, voice steady, commanding. "But sometimes it deserves recognition." The room quieted, every boot planted, every back straightened. 3 weeks ago, Maddox continued a training exercise turned very real. An unauthorized hostile force breached our perimeter. One team was isolated, exposed, and surrounded. She let the words hang. In that moment, one soldier stepped forward, not because she was told to, but because she was ready, because she had trained for it her entire life. Maddox paused, then turned slightly toward Avery, nodding. "Corporal Avery Collins," she said, "front and center." Avery walked slowly to the stage. No marching band, no music, just the solid echo of her boots against the floor. The moment didn't feel like a celebration, it felt like a reckoning. Maddox lifted a small velvet box from the podium and opened it. Inside gleamed the Distinguished Service Medal, an award almost never given to anyone below the rank of captain. "She not only saved her team," Maddox said, pinning the medal above Avery's left breast pocket, "but she shattered every assumption made about her." Then the colonel's tone shifted. "What most don't know," she continued, "is that Corporal Collins comes from one of the most elite sniper bloodlines in American military history." Whispers moved through the crowd. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Samuel Collins, served 3 tours in Vietnam. 217 confirmed eliminations. Medal of Honor, Silver Star. A tactician so precise that his training methods were studied in secret by the Army's most advanced programs. Avery felt the air change. She didn't smile. She didn't blink, because now the truth was out. Maddox stepped back. Corporal Collins has prepared some remarks. Avery stepped up to the mic. She glanced out. She didn't see ranks. She saw faces, many of which had turned away from her just weeks earlier. I was told I didn't belong here, she said, voice calm, direct. Told I wasn't tough enough, sharp enough, cold enough. She paused. Told I was a distraction, a liability, a mistake. Silence. But bullets don't care who pulls the trigger, she continued. The mission doesn't care about your gender, and death doesn't stop to check your resume before it shows up. From the front row, someone straightened, then another. You don't have to look like them, Avery said. You just have to be ready when no one else is. And in that moment, in that room full of skeptics turned witnesses, they listened. The clip of her speech hit military forums that evening. By morning, it had gone viral. Millions watched as a young woman in a pressed uniform stood before a wall of tradition and quietly, confidently rewrote the rules. 6 months after her speech shook the walls of Fort Rivington, Corporal Avery Collins stood at the edge of a wind-beaten cliff in northern Spain, the Atlantic wind howling at her back. Below her, in staggered formation across a narrow mountain pass, 12 elite soldiers adjusted scopes, tightened straps, and calibrated for crosswinds. This wasn't Fort Rivington anymore. This wasn't training. This was Ghost Squadron, a new multinational task force created by U.S. Special Operations Command in quiet coordination with allied nations. Its mission: operate where politics couldn't. Eliminate threats before headlines ever formed. Protect lives through precision and silence. Its leader, Avery Collins. Officially, she still wore the rank of corporal. But titles didn't matter here. In Ghost Squadron, command was earned, not assigned. The team was hand-picked. Half men, half women. Not for optics, but for capability. 3 former Delta Force, 2 ex-MI6 operatives, a Canadian Arctic Ranger, a French commando sniper, a South Korean scout with unmatched infiltration skills, and 1 Afghan markswoman who had once held her village alone for 8 days before rescue came. They came from different branches, countries, languages, but they spoke one common tongue: discipline, and every single one of them followed Avery. Not because she barked louder, not because she boasted, but because they'd seen the footage, read the mission reports, heard whispers of Nevada, of the ambush, of how she moved before anyone else could react, of how 3 bodies hit the dirt before her team even knew they were under fire. She never brought it up. She didn't have to. Training under Avery was unlike anything they expected. It wasn't about bravado. There were no motivational speeches, no chest-thumping drills, just fundamentals perfected, repeated, lived. She taught them to fire in silence, to breathe with the terrain, to calculate not only wind and drop, but intent, emotion, hesitation. She taught them to see. At night, she passed down pages from her grandfather's field diary, copied by hand, each one carrying notes and annotations from Samuel Collins' time in Vietnam. They studied how he tracked movement without GPS, how he could tell if an enemy was left or right-handed by footprint placement, how he knew when not to fire because the bigger target was fear. Avery would walk down the firing line, pausing behind each soldier. She didn't critique with lectures. She'd quietly say, "Again," or "Watch your drift," or sometimes just nod once and move on. They listened. Because when she spoke, it mattered. Respect didn't come because she demanded it. It came because she gave it first and never once asked for permission to lead. One evening during a live op prep in an undisclosed Eastern European facility, her second-in-command, an older Scottish veteran named Callum Reese, approached her as the squad reviewed satellite images. "You ever get tired of proving yourself, boss?" he asked, half joking. Avery didn't look up from the map. "I don't prove anything anymore," she said. "I just train them so they won't have to." He nodded once, then left her to it. Over the next several months, Ghost Squadron would operate in 6 countries, dismantled a trafficking pipeline in the Balkans, intercepted a rogue missile shipment off the Horn of Africa, rescued a kidnapped journalist from a jungle compound without firing a shot. No unit patches, no press, no awards, just results. Avery kept a photo taped inside her gear locker, an old black and white of her grandfather, Samuel Collins, in jungle fatigues, holding a rifle with a half smile under tired eyes. Next to it, a note in her handwriting: "You don't need noise to leave an echo." And every time her team assembled on a new ridgeline, blending with the shadows before the storm, the world didn't notice. But it slept a little safer, because Ghost Squadron was watching, and Avery Collins was leading it. The message came just after midnight. Avery Collins was in her quarters at a NATO forward operating base near Sarajevo, reviewing mission logs from their latest op. The lights were low and the desert wind outside whispered through the tent seams. Her encrypted tablet pinged softly. Sender, Department of Army Archives, Family Records Division. Subject request for secure contact. R.E. Samuel Collins, declassified. Her heart paused mid-beat. For years, her grandfather's military file had been a ghost. Every attempt she'd made to access more than surface-level information ended in the same polite refusal. Records unavailable. Restricted clearance. But this time was different. She activated the secure comms line. A few seconds later, the screen blinked to life. A woman appeared, 60 sharp eyes, crisp uniform, and the calm confidence of someone who had seen far more than she was allowed to admit. "This is Colonel Diane Mercer, Intelligence Oversight Division," she said. "Thank you for responding, Corporal Collins." Avery blinked. "Yes, ma'am. You said this is about my grandfather." Colonel Mercer nodded. "Up until last week, your grandfather's operations were sealed under code name Black Signal, but with recent declassification of Vietnam-era records and your own operational performance, a file has been authorized for your eyes only." Mercer leaned forward. Samuel Collins wasn't just a decorated sniper, Avery. He was part of a classified strike unit called Silent Thunder, a deep black program designed for extreme denial missions in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and several nations we still can't publicly name. Avery sat in silence. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk. "His official record shows 217 confirmed eliminations," Mercer said. "The real number, over 400. A pause. "He was one of only 3 snipers in U.S. history to reach that number." Avery exhaled slowly. Her mind reeled, but a strange clarity settled in too. It made sense now. The way he moved, the things he never said, the silence he carried even in the safe comfort of Montana snow. "There's more," Mercer continued. "Before his death, your grandfather submitted a recommendation to revive Silent Thunder. His proposal included new operational doctrine and one name." Mercer tapped something off screen. Avery's own personnel file appeared briefly. "Yours." Avery's breath caught. "You're not being recruited," Mercer said. "You're being asked if you want to inherit the command structure of a reactivated Silent Thunder directive, a next-generation version with full international reach, deep cover teams, operations that never officially happened." The colonel paused. "Ghost Squadron already functions like Silent Thunder once did. But this would be something more. You wouldn't just lead missions, you'd shape the doctrine, choose the operatives, build the legacy." Avery stared at the screen. The room felt smaller, heavier. "Why me?" she finally asked. Mercer didn't hesitate. "Because you've already demonstrated what took others years to prove. You lead without ego, train without arrogance, operate without failure. And because, frankly, no one else has ever replicated your grandfather's tactical profile." Avery walked to the window and looked out over the dark base. Far in the distance, she saw a light blinking atop a communications tower, a signal in the dark. She thought of Samuel standing behind her, guiding her hands at age 7 as she learned to align a scope, his voice calm, precise, unyielding. She turned back to the screen. "I'll do it," she said, "but on 3 conditions." Mercer raised an eyebrow. "I keep my current team. I won't abandon them." "Approved. Any operation involving civilians requires my direct consent. No political games." "Understood. And we start a training pipeline. For the next generation, men, women, all of them." Mercer's expression softened just a little. "Those were Samuel's terms too," she said, "in 1975. Avery nodded. Then the screen went black. And just like that, Silent Thunder had returned, not as a memory, but as a new kind of mission, with Avery Collins at the helm. It was never about medals for Avery Collins. Never about applause or being the first or proving anyone wrong. It was about one thing, making sure no one else had to walk the same lonely path she did, carrying legacy like a weapon doubted every step of the way. When she accepted the reins of Silent Thunder, she did so on her own terms. Her first condition? She kept her team. Every member of Ghost Squadron came with her. They had trained together, bled together, and crossed borders under moonlight with nothing but silent signals and trust. Her second no operation would compromise civilian safety. Silent Thunder would remain a scalpel, not a hammer. And finally, her most personal demand: they would train others. Not in secret, not hidden in classified files to be erased by time, but deliberately, methodically. Men, women, every background, every language. If they had the fire, Avery would give them the forge. And so Silent Thunder was reborn not just as a strike team, but as a legacy engine. Their new facility didn't exist on maps. Tucked into the spine of a cold mountain range between nations, it was built into the rock, part fortress, part training ground, part tomb, for things the world wasn't meant to see. There were no insignias, no walls filled with plaques or photos, but on the first door, every recruit passed through, 4 words were etched in steel: be your own guardian. It was the last line in Samuel Collins' journal, and it became Avery's first principle. Years passed, governments changed, headlines shifted, but the world kept sleeping a little safer and never knew why. Terror cells collapsed days before they launched. Chemical stockpiles vanished overnight. A child kidnapped in Istanbul was found sleeping in her bed by morning. No one saw the shadow move through the city. No one heard the shot fired from 2 ridgelines away. But in briefing rooms, scattered across Allied capitals, the initials ST-Ops appeared in footnotes. And among soldiers in the know, a new kind of respect grew, one that couldn't be bought with medals or time in service. It was the kind whispered between veterans at bars or across rooftops in Kabul. They say she sees the target before the drone does. Her squad moves like smoke. She never misses. They call her the ghost of the trigger. But Avery never sought that legend. What mattered most was what happened in the mountains at night when new recruits sat by the fire after their first grueling day. She would pass them the same worn copy of her grandfather's field journal. Its pages were marked with ink, sweat, and desert sand. And beside it, she'd place her own additions, fresh lessons learned from years on the edge of silence. She'd look them in the eyes and say quietly, "We don't pull the trigger to prove we're right. We pull it when we're the only ones left to stop what's coming." One snowy morning, deep in the compound's lowest chamber, Avery stood alone overlooking the firing range, where a new class of snipers trained at targets so distant they couldn't be seen without faith. She wore no ribbons, no stars, only the insignia she created herself, a quiet, carved emblem of a hawk in flight. A message pinged on her encrypted tablet: a high-value target, a compound in an ungoverned zone, a threat that no agency could touch without sparking war. Avery didn't blink. She tapped the screen twice. Her team would be ready by nightfall. As she turned to leave, her hand brushed the frame on the wall, one she had mounted herself. Inside was a faded photo of Samuel Collins holding a young Avery on his knee, both of them wearing ear protection and dust on their faces. Her tiny hands gripped the stock of a wooden training rifle. Beneath it was a handwritten line: "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who's ready to carry it forward." And Avery Collins had made sure of one thing: there would always be someone ready. In a world that's changing faster than ever, where headlines come and go and respect often gets mistaken for noise, the story of Avery Collins reminds us of something deeply American and deeply human. Character still matters. Not loud voices, not empty titles, but the quiet strength of someone who shows up when it counts, who chooses discipline over ego, duty over attention, and who honors those who came before by preparing those who come next. Avery didn't ask to lead. She didn't demand a seat at the table. She earned it, one breath, one shot, one unshakable decision at a time. And in that, there's a lesson we can all carry into our daily lives, whether you've worn a uniform or simply walked beside someone who did. In your workplace, in your family, in your community, are you the kind of person people trust when things go quiet? When the pressure rises, are you prepared to act? Not because it brings reward, but because it brings protection for others. And maybe most importantly, what legacy are you building quietly when no one's watching? Because not every mission makes the news. And not every hero wears the medals. Some simply pass down a better path and never take credit. So now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever known someone like Avery? Someone who stood their ground with quiet dignity and changed lives without needing recognition? Share your story in the comments. Your voice might be the echo that helps someone else feel seen. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you respect, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us in preserving stories that matter. Because whether it's a nurse, a veteran, a parent, or a mentor, the legacies that shape America are often the ones told in silence, until the moment they're needed most. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, you don't need to be loud to make history. You just need to be ready.